everyone. I'm Shellée Haynesworth.
And I'm Christopher Prince. And we want to welcome you to another 202Creates Masterclass. Thank you very much for joining us.
And thank you to Mayor Muriel Bowser and Director Angie M. Gates for allowing us to celebrate, support, and educate the district's creatives through 202 Creates.
We don't have a lot of time, so let's kind of get into it. Shellée and I are old friends, but why don't you tell people about yourself, Shellée?
Well, I am a proud native Washingtonian, multi-generational Washingtonian, and I'm a producer, storyteller, creative, and that's been my life's work. And I've just had the great joy and honor and privilege to do so from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and have the opportunity to create and celebrate and honor, not just the Black experience, but our city experience here, which I feel oftentimes gets overshadowed, by being in the nation's capital and the world of politics. And so I think, it's been wonderful to work in the city and work with fellow creatives like yourself to, what I like to say, expand and broaden the narrative of African Americans and our contributions in arts, literature, history, beyond DC.
Yeah, I agree. When it comes to showing the story of DC, that's one of my things as well. I'm a native Washingtonian also.
Right on. Power to the DC.
Indeed, Chocolate City all the way.
All the way.
When it comes to the story of DC, as far as being a place where people live, as outside of that image of being a federal city, is very much one of the things that I like to do as an artist. And also just to tell the Black experience. So DC is unique in having a strong Black middle class, one that has contributed a lot to the country, both politically, in the scientific world, artistically. And I'm proud to be a part of that trajectory and try to hold on to that with my art in the stories that I communicate.
I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly. I think that's the beauty of our generation, especially. It empowered us. It gave us that freedom of expression, which we still, bring to our artistic sensibilities.
Indeed.
So you mentioned your art. I guess share a little bit, with the audience about your artistic expression and your creative background.
Well, I got started as a teenager working with the Workshops for Careers in the Arts. It was an organization started by the late Peggy Cooper Cafritz, also run by the late Mike Malone. It ultimately ended up being the pilot project for the Duke Ellington High School for Creative Arts. My focus as a teenager was drama, but I eventually kind of migrated into music and writing because ended up being like the third tier of my spectrum of creativity. But that's how I got started. We did street theater around DC. I've done stuff in New York. I've done stuff in Baltimore, Philadelphia. Fortunate enough to have been collaborating with some great musicians and composers, which took me to Europe, the San Remo Film Festival in Italy, and other places. So I'm an actor, singer, writer. That's about enough.
Yeah, that's very impressive too, Chris. And you made me, when you mentioned theater, it just conjured up, because I guess theater was actually, I grew up around a lot of local artists who were into the theater scene, specifically the DC Rep. Theater. And my mom used to work with Van Tile Whitfield. I don't know if you remember him.
Sure do.
He was sort of like a father figure to me and an amazing storyteller. And a fellow Virgo. And so I guess I garnered my interest in storytelling from hanging around them, folks like Lynn Dyson as well. And just a lot of amazing artists, that was an incredible incubator, that DC Rep. And so that really influenced me and empowered me to embrace my freedom of expression, my creative sensibilities, and my interest in storytelling as well.
That's something, because I was hanging around that circle as well. I'm surprised we didn't meet each other then.
I was a few years behind you. So I was a young girl on the wall, just impressed by all these powerful people who, again, just empowered themselves and just embraced their freedom of expression. And that just really influenced me, they weren't cookie cutter.
That group of people, that was like in the heart of the Black arts movement. And from Robert Hooks coming down here from New York,
Hooks, yes.
Black rap. We had, when I was in workshops, Debbie Allen was a dance instructor.
Right.
And she was still at Howard then. But they were political, they were cultural. As you said, they were innovators.
Yes. And they were free.
And they put a sense of community in the people that followed them. A sense of responsibility, a sense of authenticity, and that stays with me to this age. I agree with you 100%.
Yes. Awesome. So I guess, why do you do the work that you do? Or did it choose you? I mean, you sort of shared a little bit by being in that amazing conclave of Black artists and that Black artist movement that was really happening, with so many spaces, that we had back then that I just really miss today. So was there anything else besides that made you choose this work?
Well, the work kind of chose me. I found as a teenager that artistic expression was the best way for me to get out how I felt, how I thought about my world. And that vehicle for expression kind of grew and stayed with me as an adult. Went away to school, went up to Philadelphia for school, came back to DC, and was fortunate enough to get into a community of artists that helped to nurture that as a young adult. And so that is my main form of expression. I'm fortunate to have been born an artist. I think for a lot of us, it's kind of put on us. It's
right.
not something you really choose. It's who you are. And if you are fortunate enough to be in an environment that allows you that area of self-expression that will nurture that part of your personality, then you can thrive and get that out. And I'm fortunate to have been in that circumstance.
Amen. And I would say the same thing. It was just, I just can't describe it any other way, but just giving us that freedom of expression,
Mm-hmm.
And it just reconfirmed who I was. It empowered me to be who I am today. And, I just think it was a wonderful moment in time, to be coming up in that era of storytellers and artists here in DC. So what do you think in terms of today? What is it like creating in the city today? What changes have you seen in the creative community, especially, the African-American creative community?
Well, it's interesting because my experience as a creative person was always a little siloed. I had a cohort of people that I created with. And being a little older, a lot of those people have transitioned, or some of them are no longer in DC. So I can't really give a good indication on the community at large. Technology has made a difference. When I first started creating, there was no internet. We met in person, we rehearsed in person, we had to gather in people's houses or in someone's basement in a club somewhere that we were able to get access to during the daytime hours. And so the sense of community was different. It was built upon a different kind of connection. Unfortunately, I don't know a lot of young people that I can really tap into. I'm beginning to kind of stretch out a little more.
You know me.
Right. Yeah, you're a little younger. I guess you could wear that mantle of a young person if you want. I'll lay that on you.
What'd you say?
I'll lay that mantle of a young person on you. If you want to be called a young person, you can carry that.
Well, it's all about the energy. You are how you feel.
That's true. So yeah, that's what that's how it is. But how about you, Shellée? What do you think about that?
Well, I think you make a very good point about, that interactivity, being immersed in a scene and, when you were creating, and of course, as a producer, we oftentimes we were in a studio or an edit suite or whatever. And so the advent of technology, it has changed that. I started out working with, a lot of editors. It's so funny how life comes full circle. You're creating remotely. But I also think the advent of technology has opened up the opportunity to get more of the African-American experience out there. Tell more stories, again, to expand the narrative and balance it, balance the narrative of the African-American experience. And so, and I hope, with all these different points of distributions, all these streaming networks, that it will provide an opportunity for, our generation and, the storytellers who are in, DC now to really get their content out there, because our content equals currency.
Very good. We know when you talk about telling stories, a lot of people might not know some of the history of DC. And I know you have captured that with Black on Broadway.
And Black Broadway on You.
Talking about U Street. So why don't you tell folk a little bit about that?
The Black Broadway on You project, absolutely. Growing up, I have always just enjoyed the discovery of African-American history and Black history. And sadly, I grew up attending, for the most part, DC public schools, and they didn't really focus on a lot of the local history, here in DC. And so in spring 2013, I was driving around the U Street corridor with my grandmother, and I almost missed my turn when we got to the intersection of 14th and U because it had changed so drastically, and that was spring 2013. But in that moment, my grandmother, who migrated to DC from Louisiana in the early 1930s, she began to share her story about her times working as a part-time barber and going to some of the functions along the U Street corridor, back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, because she was like 11 or 12 years old when she arrived in the early 1930s. But in that moment, she had never shared, her personal story and history when she came to DC, nor had I really inquired. But in that moment, a light bulb went off, and I decided that we needed a platform, and so I created the Black Broadway on You project, which is a digital platform. And it's, again, the vision is to tell the story at the intersection of technology. So I've created many documentaries, but basically I just thought we needed a destination where people could go and discover this history because it was so fragmented, and I even, it inspired me to do a deeper historical dive. And to your point earlier, Chris, about us being not just an epicenter for arts and entertainment, I discovered that this community was an epicenter for civic engagement and social change for Black America, not just here in DC, but for us all across this country. And so that's what led me to creating the Black Broadway on You project, which is evolving, and that's the beauty of, again, my generation, your generation of storytellers, is that we evolve the work as we're inspired, and so you can go to blackbroadwayonyou.com and discover, this digital platform, and it's just full of content that's just sort of shining a light on the hidden contributions of so many path breakers. We have a lot of these families as well. I really enjoyed just bonding more with the Alis, owners of Ben's Chili Bowl, who've been there since 1958. The family, Lee family at Lee's Flower Shop, the Mitchells and Industrial Bank. It's so funny. That was one of my first bank accounts when I was a teenager, when they were on Rhode Island Avenue, because I grew up in the Brookland Woodbridge area. And so it's just, again, life is full circle, but just learning more about their contributions and the importance of us reclaiming our history, because we talk about displacement and things of that nature. But I feel like if we really understood the significance of these families, some of the other path breakers and these buildings, and why it's important that we honor and celebrate and preserve these buildings, our history, it allows us to claim, to maintain our stake in cities like DC and other cities, where we've had the same just very vibrant Black incubators and ecosystems that and many of these people, we stand on their shoulders today, so it's a lot of folks that came through. I mean, when you talk about literary artists, I had no idea that Langston Hughes, he actually lived along the U Street corridor, the father of Black history. A lot of folks don't know that U Street was his hub, when he was publishing the Negro Bulletin, which he was the father of Black history. And all of that was taking place right here in DC, along the U Street Shaw corridor. So I think that's really significant and just something, again, as we talk about expanding the Black narrative, because oftentimes we hear about the Harlem Renaissance, but these Black Renaissance movements were happening in DC, Baltimore, Pennsylvania, even Portland, Oregon. I discovered the Black area there was once called Black Broadway.
Yeah, we have a very rich tradition that is often overlooked.
Often, but it's up to us,
There's so much we have that we brought the country that people don't know about, again, from that being overshadowed by it being a federal city. People don't delve into the lives of the Washingtonians, the citizens of the city. That is part of what was behind us working on the Coffeehouse, the Enoch Alley Coffeehouse story, Fierceness Served, which is a documentary on the Black LGBTQ Renaissance that was here in the 80s. That talks about the contribution that culturally was made by that group of cohorts, such as Essex Hemphill, Michelle Parkinson,
Christopher
Prince, as artists and writers, but also the political side. The Coffeehouse was a converted carriage house that was over by I Street, between 9th and 10th on I, Northeast DC. And it was used as a venue for rehearsing and performances, but also as a meeting spot. The DC Coalition of Black Gays and Lesbians was first meeting in that location. That organization was the very first national organization, political organization for Black gays and lesbians in the country. They ended up having 7 chapters around the country from here to California that met to address the needs of the country's Black LGBTQ community. Then we had the artists that met through there. There was an organization called Sapphire Sapphos that met at the Coffeehouse, a Black lesbian organization that dealt with the social and political needs of their community and also influenced people from around the country. So the film that you and I worked on, Fierceness Served, tells that story, which is very rich and very influential. DC had the first Black Gay Pride to happen nationwide.
Exactly.
And now there are Black Gay Prides all over the planet. But that is part of the influence that comes out of this great city.
No, I concur.
So if folks want to learn more about that, you can go to thecoffeehouse.dc.com. That's the website. It's a great documentary. We've had some private screenings of it in the past, and you can look for it in the 2022 as we enter the festival circuit. Keep your eye open for that.
No, I really enjoy working and collaborating with you all on the Fierceness Served documentary because I wasn't aware of that history. And once again, it just spoke to the freedom of expression that this city has given so many of us. You mentioned Essex Hemphill. I was just reading an article where his work was cited. And, and that's what it's about, telling stories. It's about giving voice to the voices, voiceless people that you don't hear about, but who have really moved the needle forward, for, in this case, for the Black LGBTQ community. And as you said, folks aren't aware, that the DC Black Pride movement started during that time frame. But, what I was really impressed with was the collaboration. It was inviting other Black creatives into the space. We didn't mention Audre Lorde, who is just one of the pioneers, a Black feminist who's embraced not just by the, Black LGBTQ community or that community at large. She's embraced by everybody, And so just discovering that she had attended events in that space. You mentioned Essex Hemphill and just so many of the other artists who are cited. I was watching a documentary last year on Hulu about Pride, and it was so many people that we had interviewed in our Fish and Serve documentary who were featured in that documentary, but these are artists who were performing, at the coffee space. But I think the importance of telling history, once again, it's allowing us to reclaim our history. But most importantly, I think history points the way to our future, as we talk about Black futures and we look at spaces, because I've had, when we were filming Fierce and Serve and just talking with, some of the, Black creatives, from the, community today, there aren't any spaces, that we have for the Black LGBTQ community today in DC. And I want to know why, why can't we do the same thing that you all did with the Coffeehouse? You had a space, you created it, and it was basically a launching pad, for many Black creatives. So, what can we do to rectify that? Why are we doing this,
Yeah, well, economics has a lot to do with it. I think that art does not exist in a vacuum.
Right.
That when it comes to funding, when it comes to having a light from the outside community shine within the different subcultures within the artistic community becomes a challenge. Right. With DC, gentrification has very much changed the landscape of available spaces for performance in DC. Forget about being able to live as an artist, because an artist's life is a hard one.
Yeah, sustainability.
Consider compensation. Yeah. Consider whether you're unionized or not. DC has a good local musicians union, and you can get equity. You could be an equity actor, but if you are a grassroots creative and you don't have those kind of connections, you have to have a day job in order to really focus on your art. And then you got to pay these exorbitant rents. Just to live. Forget about having a performance space or rehearsal space. Right. So the dynamics have changed quite a bit. We were fortunate back when I was younger that we worked in people's homes and we had a community. Collaboration was very important to us. Okay. And I'm sure it manifests today in various ways. And I would open that up to, people watching that just to kind of reach out and have that discussion, kind of try to bridge the kind of cross-generational gap here. But collaboration was important to us. And that's one reason that we made it through. And again, I said we didn't have technology, so we had to physically meet. Right. We had to plow through. So I think that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. But I think, again, that's the importance of history, because hopefully, when this generation views Fierce and Serve, hopefully it will provide them a roadmap, and a way to, again, make a way out of no way. Which is what Fierce and Serve, the coffee house movement was about. They had this carriage house, which was small, but it was large in terms of this impact and the influence. And so, I just think we're, when you talk about gentrification, I guess assimilation, I still feel like we are still the change that we're waiting for,
That's right.
And that there's a way, and so hopefully, again, this work will inspire, creatives, specifically Black creatives in the Black LGBTQ community to come together, to collaborate more and find these spaces, because we know DC there's no void in spaces that, we could potentially, maybe create the same type of movement.
I agree. And there's no void in talent that's here either.
Talent, exactly.
We are brimming, that much I do have a touch on. And I can see that, you go online and you see that DC has a pop and there's still a lot of creative, adventurous, young Black folk doing things in this city. When it comes to work, I know we talk about how we are driven by our need for self-expression. But when it comes to rejection, when it comes to having to balance job, work dynamics, setbacks, how have you dealt with that during the course of your career, Shellée?
Well, I think how I've dealt with it is, I try to stay vested and keep my hand on the pulse or the creative pulse of where things are going. Oftentimes a lot of my colleagues, that are producers, they always tell me that I've been sort of a forward thinking kind of person. And so I think that's what has helped me to sustain my career, is that, I'm just fortunate to land in these creative arenas, recently I've done this genre now is docu-style. So I've had a fortune to work on a lot of docu-style projects, which is basically, stuff we've been doing, for a while. It's so, I think that's what has allowed me to sustain myself. The fact that I am independent, so allows me to move and grow and learn. I have the opportunity to work with and collaborate, let me say, with a lot of different creators, a lot of them new, which has been helpful for me as far as, how to utilize technology, because when I started producing, they were still filming everything with film, And so now, with this advent of the different types of cameras and everything, it still reminds me of the film process, because you go out and shoot, and then you have to go back and color correct. You got to download the footage. And so I just, the experience that I have, starting out in traditional media, I'm able to basically, use that same experience to stay relevant, in the way we're telling stories today. So, and then again, I mentioned earlier the different points of distributions. Recently I had an opportunity to produce a series that landed on Meta, Facebook. And so I think, that's where we have to go. We have to go where the technology is telling us. And also the fact that a lot of our stories are still undertold and hidden. And so hopefully, this technology is going to open up the opportunity for us to get more of those stories out, like Fierceness Served, like Black Broadway on You.
Yeah, well, I guess the next step would be collaboration, not only on an artistic level, but on an economic one, where we'll be able to kind of finance ourselves and create avenues and outlets that we can tell our own stories. DC is fortunate to have like Howard University Television and Radio. The TV One started here in DC. BET was here in DC. So there are ways that we can kind of control our own narratives and get them out. It's just another level of collaboration.
Yes. And then there's so many, again, and you mentioned, I forgot to mention, I worked at TV One, BET. That's where I garnered a lot of my producing experience, especially at BET. I worked there in the late 80s, early 90s, where basically you jumped in and told these stories with, not a lot of oversight, but it was really good. And it was a very collaborative experience and a great exchange with fellow producers and writers. I mean, it was awesome. It was an amazing incubator. And I miss having, BT here in DC, because I definitely think it catapulted a lot of us into this industry who are still here, producing and writing and telling stories. We started at BET, and the same with TV One, the fact that was founded by Kathleen Hughes,
right.
WOL, which was, it was a radio station, but they told the stories. They kept us informed of what was happening, not just here in DC, but was also happening in the, in our communities throughout the nation. And so having WOL on H Street, I remember just have fond memories of seeing Miss Hughes in the window at WOL. And so having the opportunity to work at TV One, in fact, I produced a special on her when the Howard University School of Communication was renamed in her honor. I produced a special for TV One. And it was just, again, that whole full circle. But I felt that, by being a part of that history and, experiencing the impact of her work. And again, she was innovative because no one was doing that. She, and she had great hosts on there like Dick Gregory. I love Dick Gregory because they truthfully told our stories, what was happening in our communities. And so
Yeah, those a groundbreaking period for us.
Was.
We are fortunate in this day and age that we have a DC government that supports its artists. We want to give props out to 202Creates and the platform that it's created for people to come together, share information, to network as well, and a good way for us to move forward as a community and not only grow as artists, but to push forward the story of our great city.
Yes, and I would definitely give a shout out to 202Creates. They've supported many of the projects that I've done with Black Broadway on You. I had a interactive exhibit which they supported. I've been on some of the other programs in the past talking about the history and the project. And so it's great. I mean, we definitely need 202Creates and just this platform, and it's, once again, it's providing an opportunity for us to be exposed to generation now and next as far as the artists, and I think it's been rewarding, this whole 202Creates movement, because that's what it is. It's a movement, to keep us relevant, viable, and giving that voice to us creatives. So I'm totally grateful to the work that they're doing.
Indeed, indeed. And, when you think about Generation Next and Now, I'm curious about a sense of responsibility. And I would not like to put it quite that way. Let's think more in the lines of how we are able to assist each other in our professional and artistic expression, how we make a cross-generational connection. Do you think that exists? What do you think can enhance it? What do you think that, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I definitely think for us, when I say us, I mean Black creatives, I really subscribe to this intergenerational movement. I really think that's critical for us, is that, we are passing the torch, to Generation Next, but we're also learning from them too, because we're still out here creating. And as we talked about, we have to sustain our livelihoods. This is what we do. And so I think it provides an opportunity for us to create this new movement of Black artistic expression, because we're innovators. We never do the cookie cutter safe thing. And so I think it's imperative that we team up with Generation Now and Next to share with them our experience, work with them to help us reclaim this history that they don't know about, and that history that we are part of, and once again, the history that we all, or these artists and the culture, we stand on the shoulders of these giants. Because, we talked about with Black Broadway on that project, I had an opportunity to meet with foreign journalists, and it was interesting. I mean, they have no idea who we are as, Black creatives and artists. They had us in such a box, and it was so cool because I had an opportunity to take some Russian generals over to Ben's Chili Bowl, and they met Mrs. Ali, and that happened from telling stories, about our community, from my Black Broadway on You project. They saw it out there. And here I am introducing Mrs. Ali to some, former Russian generals, and they were shocked, you know what I mean? Wow. And so I think that's how we just sort of, again, advance our cause as well, and getting people to understand who we are through telling our own stories,
Yeah, and I think that platform of intergenerational interaction is important, not only for the preservation of history, but for us as artists in my generation to move forward. Right. Not only when it comes to technology, but in the perceptions of who we are.
Exactly.
We evolve in our understanding of our placement in this country and in the world. And I think that happens on the forefront. Right. A lot of movements are manned by the youth. It's the young people to move things forward.
Right.
Exactly. And I think it's important for us to kind of stay in touch, to kind of glean that understanding, to know when it is to stand behind them, give them that space to take that front line, to be the support. And when it's time to kind of step up just to whisper in the ear, Exactly. I'm excited by the things the little bit that I see in the merging of mediums when it comes to music and poetry, which is kind of where we came out of the bag we came out of back in the 80s. When it comes to theater and music and poetry, there's a lot of powerful stuff going on. And really? I like what I see. And I think that, again, as a people, that's the avenue for us to step up. So I'm all behind everything that you said. It's right on the spot.
Yes. And we are, I mean, our culture has influenced the world, you know what I mean? As we shared several times today, how even, you know, here in DC, you know, the artistic and cultural movements that were created here have influenced the world, you know, and I think that's what we do globally. I mean, we are the culture. I mean, we are the innovators. They look to us. I mean, that's the part of the discussion too today is, you know, just seeing some of the Black creatives not financially benefiting, you know, who are creating content on Instagram, YouTube. And I find that very disturbing, you know, that, you know, once again, we're still in this space where we're driving this creativity, driving the culture, but we're not being rewarded, you know. And so that's what I really want to see change, you know, is that, you know, everything we do, it's, you know, sadly, but it's true, oftentimes is co-opted and we're not financially benefiting. So, you know, I would really like to see us, you know, Generation Next, and hopefully whatever role we can play in standing next to them, behind them, beside it, however, just making sure that we are monetizing and as we move artistic and freedom expression forward, that, you know, we're creating that sustainability for our creative ecosystem. I think Alvin Haley has a very good quote about that. It's like creators, we never turn the switch off. It's always on. We're always creating. But now, you know, what's so interesting is as a creator, you got to do all this other stuff. You got to know how to market. You got to be on social media. You got to do it all. And so, you know, I just, you know, that's my wish and hope for us, is that we really can build a sustainable model that doesn't just dim our creative light, you know?
Yeah, well, you know, historically, there's been a challenge for creative people, period, but Black creatives, especially in this country, is having their work co-opted, being exploited, and not having a sense of a way to protect their economic investment, that intellectual property, to move it forward and reap the rewards of that. That continues to be a challenge. And there's a strong historical basis to that. So I agree with you exactly. And how we get over that, I'm not quite sure. I think, again, when we talk about collaboration, it's a matter of expanding kind of who we work with. Right. The businesses, the organizations, just setting up different kinds of networks and expanding what that network is, I think, is important. And that might be like the next front, is working with businesses.
Yeah.
Financial institutions, finding those interpersonal sponsors and supporters that help to push the work forward on a financial level. It's all necessary.
Yeah. And so they need to work with us. I mean, they need to, these companies, you know, as we talk about advertisers, you know, we talk about creating content, you know, I know, you know, several colleagues who have created their own platforms and networks, and they can't get advertising, you know. Hopefully, again, you know, we got to, I think, you know, like you said, we got to work legally to figure out how we can monetize this work. And at the same time, we don't want to be fearful of getting it out there, you know, and that's what I love about us. We just create. I mean, whatever we do, you know, whatever we say, we just can't help it. You know, it's who we are. It's our compass. It's our salvation, you know, because that's what creating has also been for me. It's been my salvation, you know, when all this stuff is happening, it's like I just go into that creativity, storytelling mode, and it just makes me feel good, you know? So, yeah. So what were you going to say, Chris? I know you had the next question. And thank you for leading the way on asking these questions.
We work together, baby. You know,
I know. That's how we do.
So look, tell folk what you got on the plate coming up. What's going on with you in real time, and then I'll tell mine.
Okay, of course I got to tell mine first. Okay. But I mean, again, so I'm, still working on getting more funding to get these stories out for my Black Broadway or You project, what I call mini docs, because there's so many people who I've interviewed. I've had the great fortune to interview. I have about 40 interviews in a can. And so I want to take some of these interviews and create what I call these mini docs about some of these path breakers, in various verticals. So it's not necessarily arts and culture, because again, when I'll keep saying we got to expand and change the narrative. Some of these folks we're making change in the civic space, commerce. And so, I've been applying for grants for that. And hopefully at some point I'll get an opportunity to do a full-length documentary. I feel like when we talk about what's missing as far as stories, as far as the African-American experience and our contributions, are working on a story. I can't say exactly, but I'll just say it's about a prominent nurse. So I'm developing a documentary for that, because I can't fully say right now, because I don't want anybody else to go, hey. But so I'm working on that. And I've been working on a few, as I mentioned earlier, this whole docu-style genre. So I'm working on a gun violence prevention campaign. And, that's highlighting the work of frontline workers in a few cities who are dealing with gun violence and the ripple effect of the impact of gun violence, sadly, in the African-American community. And so how, just highlighting some of those people who are doing the work, that folks don't know about, who are really moving the needle forward. So it's been great to work on that project for this year. And a couple of museum pieces, just working, trying to stay creative, relative, and just, again, my whole thing is about telling these stories that haven't been told. So, and hopefully, I feel like 2022 is another opportunity for us to continue with our missions, to get these stories out here. And with all these different platforms, I'm excied. And what about you, my brother? What are you working on? Well, I know you're doing something fun and groovy.
Well, I'm pushing Fierce and Serve forward.
Yes,
we entered into a couple of festivals, so folk can look forward to seeing that on the festival circuit moving forward in 2022. And we are kind of activating ourselves on social media. You can find that on Instagram and Facebook. It's The Coffeehouse DC. We try to initiate conversations on Black gay culture, on what's happening politically and culturally, because I do think those two things are intertwined. We did not really talk much about that, but just kind of was on it was beneath our conversation, but just to bring that up a little bit, that as people of color in this country, especially right now, what's happening in America, I think it's important for us to have a political sense of who we are, not only an artistic sense. And I think art is a way that you can move politics forward. It helps the people to kind of put themselves in context, in a larger context. So we talk about that on that site as well. As an individual, I'm a singer at heart. And, I'm moving forward with my career. I got a gig coming up very soon. You guys can look for me. My website is chrisprincecreates.com. You can follow me on Instagram as well, where I put out my poetry. So I'm going to be, in fact, I got rehearsal later on today for this upcoming gig. It's jazz and original music I do with a trio. It's kind of a fusion that I do. So a mixture of jazz, R&B fusion. Not quite contemporary jazz. I guess contemporary jazz in a way. I kind of stepped away from the straight ahead and kind of creating my own stuff and do original music. So that's what's happening with me right now.
Excellent.
Where can people find you online, Shellée?
Yes, and I forgot to mention, as we talked about that intergenerational movement, I think we talked offline about this. I'm not the talk about myself all the time person. So again, that's why I thank 202 Creates for pushing us out of our comfort zone. Thank you, 202 Creates. So I've also been working on a virtual tour with some University of Maryland students. It's a virtual reality tour of some of the historical sites along Black Broadway. when it was known on U Street. And so that should be coming out sometime in February to honor and celebrate Black History Month. So you can find me. My website is indigocreativeworks.com. I'm on social media personally, but you can find me out there. I'm not, like I said, when you're in your creative mode, I haven't done a lot of social media stuff lately, but so you can find me out there on Black Broadway on U.com, and that's the letter U, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And, we're also on YouTube, but I'll try to do a better job. This conversation has inspired me to try to do a better job with social media and just getting the word out. But I try to do as much as I can, but and so I forgot to mention too, we talked about collaborations and the community working together. I wanted to give a shout out to a lot of the spaces in the city who have embraced this work. Recently, I did an exhibit with Woolly Mammoth Theater. Studio Theater has hosted our interactive exhibit a few times. And so they've been very supportive of this work and have really enjoyed discovering this history that's literally beneath their feet as well, because they're here in DC. So I wanted to give a shout out to some of those organizations that have been supporting this work and just giving me a platform, basically.
Very good. Very good. Well, look, thank you very much for this conversation, Shellée. It's been good to share this time with you.
Yes, and thank you. I look forward to 2022 and folks discovering the work that we did with the Fierceness Serve, the Unique Alley Coffeehouse documentary. I really enjoyed working with you, Chris, and some of the other artists. We didn't give a shout out to our wonderful director, Michelle Parkinson, and the rest of our collaborators, Wason Jones, Greg Adams, and Pamela Jabari, who also worked on that project, who were part of that artistic movement, are still part of the artistic movement that, the coffee house sort of birthed and launched. So many folks, and I'm just glad we're still here.
Indeed. Indeed.
Here.
Indeed. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Muriel Bowser, for presenting this 202 Creates Masterclass. You guys stay tuned, share with your friends, and we look forward to the next broadcast.
Yes, as I always say, to the next episode, stay safe and be well.
Indeed.